The End of Oz, Chapter 10. Nox, Madison, and Langwyader's palace vanished in a flash as I tumbled forward into darkness. I cried out in surprise and fear, but my scream was swallowed by the thick dark that surrounded me. But I wasn't falling, I realized. I was flying. At my feet the shoes glowed faintly with the comforting silver light, and suddenly I wasn't afraid. I felt the same rush of emotion that had gone through me as I reached out to Lorraine. Home. I felt home. All around me the darkness began to glow. Golden rays of light streaked past me as I flew, and overhead the sky lightened as if the sun was rising somewhere. I was flying over a lush, beautiful jungle. Towering trees carpeted the earth below me with green. At their tops, huge red flowers bloomed, unfolding to greet the warm golden light. I gasped. I'd seen a lot of beautiful things in Oz, but this was something else. Something totally alien and strange, and impossibly familiar at the same time. I'd never been here, but I knew where I was. "Welcome back, Amy," Lorraine's voice said. She was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Her voice surrounded me. It was part of the air I breathed and the breeze that carried me endlessly toward her over the blooming desert. "Where am I?" I asked, but before she answered I already knew. "You're back in my country," she replied. "The world between worlds. In this moment you are safe, and I am afraid it won't be for long, my dear. As I told you the first time we met, your task is not yet finished." "I know," I said, "but it seems impossible. Not that we can't tackle it," I added hastily, in case she thought I hadn't learned anything since the last time I'd seen her. "I'm just not sure what to do next. Mombi's dead. We can't reach anyone back in Oz. Dorothy's allied with the Gnome King. Lang doesn't want our help. I'm not sure why the road brought us to her." "The road is wise in its own way," Lorraine said. "As I told you, there is much still that is not clear to me. I'm a fairy, not a clairvoyant." I could hear the smile in her voice. "But I do know that Langwyader is crucially important to your quest. You must gain her trust." "She hates us," I said. "She is hurt," Lorraine said simply. "More than you can imagine. So are you. In fact, so is Dorothy. But as you are learning, my dear, we must come to terms with the wounds of our past if we are to survive the future. And I have some hopeful news that will cheer you." The air in front of me shivered and almost solidified. It was as if I was flying toward a giant window that stayed just out of reach, and behind the solid barrier I could see... "Is that Oz?" I gasped, recognizing the ruins of the Emerald City where Ozma had held her coronation. Hundreds of tiny figures surged back and forth. I realized I was watching a battle. "It is indeed, and right now there was a great battle." Lorraine's voice was gravely reading my thoughts. "Look more closely, child. All is not yet lost." The vision on the other side of the window sharpened and zoomed in. I saw battalions of Glinda soldiers in their identical armor, wielding weapons and fighting like demons. But they were battling my friends. There was Lulu whirling through the fray, her pistol firing shot after shot and her mouth open. Although I didn't hear anything, I knew from the look on her face and that there was a howl of glee. Winkies, Munchkins, and monkeys, winged and wingless ones, battled side by side, matching Glinda's soldiers blow for blow. Gert was standing in the middle of them all, leveling a dozen of Glinda's soldiers with an appropriate pink wave of smoke. Despite the chaos, I could see it. Glinda's army was losing. It was a beautiful sight. For the first time in a long time, something that felt like hope flared up in my chest. And then the vision shifted to a different part of the battlefield, and this time I gasped in surprise. Ozma hovered over the melee, her beautiful wings unfurled, hurling bolts of magic at Glinda's army, and beside her was Mombi. Mombi's alive?" I said in shock. I couldn't wait to tell Nox. I'd been terrified by her the first moment I met her, purple webs and all, but I was glad she was here, and I knew Nox would be too. The figure next to Mombi turned and I recognized the gorgeous profile that once upon a time I had crushed on before I fell for Nox. Pete. "Pete is fighting for us?" "Ozma and Pete are still connected, you know," Lorraine said. "He betrayed you to save himself. But the guilt still haunts him." "It should," I muttered. "And Mombi survived the Gnome King's attack. He was distracted trying to rescue Dorothy from the Emerald Palace. Ozma's army is fighting the last battle of Oz. She is a credit to us all." Lorraine's voice was filled with pride. And then I almost shouted out a warning. Glamora was zooming toward Ozma in a wave of crackling pink magic. There was no mistaking the truth now. All of Glamora's kind benevolence was gone. Her face was twisted and evil, and the terrible scar that Glinda had given her looked ugly and raw, as if it's her sister controlling her body had opened the wound all over again. But Ozma saw her coming and was ready. She moved her hands, and a web of golden thread spun itself around her as Glamora hurtled forward. Glamora crashed into Ozma's net in a burst of sparks, but Ozma's defenses held. But when Glamora pulled away, I could see a network of fire, smoking lines all over her body where Ozma's web had burned her. The witch and the fairy clashed again and again, and while Ozma looked fresh and strong, Glamora was clearly flagging. "The magic holding her to her sister is exhausting her," Lorraine said. "Glinda has warped too much power for too long, and now it is costing her. Stealing magic from Oz, enslaving Munchkins, refusing death when it is her time." I could feel disapproval in Lorraine's voice, but there was something more than that, too. Regret. "Is there another way to stop her?" I asked. I was watching Ozma battle Glamora toward the ground, but I was also thinking of someone else who needed to be stopped. Lorraine sighed. I could almost feel her shrug. "Power will always corrupt those who have not learned to serve it properly," Lorraine said. "What is happening now has happened before, and what has happened before will happen again." "The same thing?" I asked in astonishment. "Some cycle of it," Lorraine said. I reflected on that as in front of me, Ozma struck the final blow. A powerful bolt of golden lightning hit Glamora in the chest and knocked her out of the sky. As the witch lay powerless on the ground, Ozma extended her hands. I turned my head away, not wanting to watch the killing blow. I had no love for Glinda, but Glamora had once been my friend, and whatever she was now, I didn't want to see her suffer. Although I believed that the Order was wrong in trying to use our love to move Nox and me around like chess pieces, I loved the witches. All of them. They had taught me about magic. They had helped me shed Salvation Amy and become me. "Isn't there something you can do?" I asked desperately. Lorraine shook her head. "It's up to her now. Glinda and Glamora have been battling for so very long. Imagine that much good and that much wicked occupying the same body. But you should look now." Reluctantly, I raised my head. Ozma's voice was peaceful and calm, almost gentle. Rays of golden light flowed from her fingers, wrapping Glamora in ropey cords that solidified in front of my eyes. Within her bonds, Glamora's form grew blurry and indistinct. And then Ozma lowered her arms with a fierce motion, shouting an incantation I couldn't hear, and Glamora and her bonds disappeared. "She didn't kill her," I breathed. "What if she escapes?" "What if she does?" Lorraine said. "She will remember Ozma's mercy, and while it might not shift the course of what she chooses next, the balance of compassion will be preserved." Compassion, I thought. Not good, not wicked. Forgiveness, and empathy, and love. But who had she saved? Was it Glinda or Glamora? Ozma looked up from the battlefield, and for the briefest second her eyes met mine. She squinted, and then she smiled. "Good luck, Amy," she mouthed. "She can see me?" "She can see me," Lorraine corrected, "but she knows you are with me. Don't lose heart, Amy. Your path lies through Ev. You must complete the task you are brought here to do. You must defeat Dorothy." The vision of Oz disappeared as if someone had flicked off a television. "I couldn't do it, Lorraine," I said. "I couldn't kill her." And then I realized what she'd said. Not kill Dorothy. Defeat her. I was right. There was another way. That was what Lorraine was trying to tell me. That was why she'd shown me the battle Ozma had fought. The wicked had been wrong. Killing Dorothy wasn't the only way to defeat her. But if that was true, it was up to me to find another way. I felt her smile again. "Dorothy was just like you once, you know. Headstrong and intelligent and brave, looking for adventure wherever it found her. None of us were entirely wicked or entirely good, or entirely evil for that matter. We are made of what shapes us. That was pretty cryptic advice, but I had a feeling it was all going to get it. I was going to get. Be brave, my dear, Lorraine said. I felt a brush of lips across my forehead. A fairy's kiss, just like Gert had kissed me once, after my first battle in Oz. The battle where I thought I'd watched her die. Warmth spread through my body. Her kiss washed away my exhaustion and fear. I felt completely safe. Goodbye for now, dear Amy, she said. But her voice sounded farther away. Below me, the verdant jungle was crumbling into dust. Darkness swallowed me again, but this time I wasn't afraid. Amy! Someone was shouting my name in the distance. Amy! What happened? Amy! The voice was full of panic. And familiar. Knox? I said. Amy! His voice was tinged with relief. I opened my eyes. I hadn't even known I'd closed them. I was in Lang's guest chambers. Knox and Madison were staring at me, their eyes huge with fear. Holy shit, Madison breathed. What just happened? Are you okay? You just, had a seizure, and your shoes were glowing, and your eyes were, rolling back in your head. I interrupted her babble. It's okay, I said. I'm fine. I really am. Knox, you're not going to believe this, but Mombi's alive. What? I saw it, I said eagerly. Just now. I was with Lorraine. You were having a seizure, Madison said, her face suddenly concerned. You didn't go anywhere, Ames. I shook my head impatiently. No, listen, I saw them. I saw her. She's still alive, Knox. Knox turned his back, his shoulders hunched. I had never seen him cry, but when I wrapped his arms around him, I realized he wasn't crying, he was laughing. It's hard to kill a witch, he said. I smiled sadly, but before I could respond, I heard footsteps pounding down the hall. Seconds later, Lang Wyaters flung the door open, her eyes wild with fury and fear. Her mask was gone, her kimono clutched tight around her chest, and she was breathing hard. What the hell is wrong with you? She snarled. What are you doing? We all looked at her in surprise. What were you thinking, using magic like that here? You couldn't have told Dorothy you were here any more clearly than if you'd marched up to the Gnome King's palace and banged on the door. Whatever you just did sent a signal flare of power so huge they probably felt it in Oz. Knox and I exchanged glances. I didn't think, I began. No, she said. That much is clear. You have to get out of here before they come looking for you. I'm not going down with you, just because you're a bunch of idiots. I'm sorry, I said hastily. I know it was a huge risk, but I saw Lorraine, Lang. She told me we have to work together. The road brought us to you for a reason. You know it as well as I do. Lorraine is a myth, Lang snapped. But for the first time, she seemed almost uncertain. She was wavering. Somewhere, some part of her knew I was right. Knox could feel it too. We don't have anywhere to go, he said. Lang, we want to kill Dorothy just as much as you do, and bring down the Gnome King while we're at it. They were going to find out where we were sooner or later. We just have to move faster. You have to let us help you. I don't think you're in the position to be issuing ultimatums, Lang said, and I fight alone. That's not what you learned in the Order, he countered. I learned a lot of things in the Order, she said. Thanks to you, I learned how to abandon the people you trust and send your allies into danger. Knox looked at her for a long beat and said, I'm sorry, Lonadel. At the sound of her old name, she startled. I know you think I made a mistake, but I didn't have a choice. I had to do what was best for the Order. You know that. I would never have put any of you at risk if I didn't have any other option. You killed her. And then he really looked at her. Lang, Melindra isn't dead. Melindra? What did she have to do with any of this? I knew Melindra and Knox had history, but I knew Melindra wasn't my biggest fan. But we trained together, fought together. I might not like her, but I trust the half-metal, half-human girl with my life. You're lying, Lang said. No one survives the Scarecrow's workshop. No one. She did, I said. He's not lying, I've met her. I had no idea what was happening, but if Knox needed to convince Lang that Melindra was alive, I could at least help him do that. She was alive when we left Oz, anyway. I felt a small well of pity for Lang rise up in me. She had built her life around an elaborate vengeance plot, only to learn that Melinda was alive after all. What did he do to her? How did she escape? Melinda's the best fighter the Order has ever seen, Nox said. You know that as well as I do. She survived. She's different, but she survived. Of course, I thought. Lang had been part of the Order before Melinda was tortured, transformed into some of the Scarecrow's twisted creations, but if Nox was leaving that part out, it was on purpose, so I kept my mouth shut. To my utter surprise, Lang's eyes filled with tears. She turned away from us, staring sightlessly at the wall. Nox reached out to touch her shoulder, but thought better of it and pulled his hand back. All her disguises had fallen away. Her face was filled with raw emotion and so much pain, I wanted to grab her up in a bear hug, even though I knew prickly, easily angered Lang would be more likely to take it as an assault than a gesture of comfort. Finally, she reached some kind of inner decision. She sighed and straightened her shoulders, pushing her long hair out of her face. I'm not going to work with you. I don't like you, and I don't like anything about this. But I'll take you to one of my smuggling hideouts, she said. It's warded. It will hide you for now. But then I can decide what to do next, and how to get rid of you without risking my own skin. I let out of my breath slowly. We were that much closer to Lang helping us, but I had no idea what had just happened between her and Nox. I shot him a look, but he shrugged helplessly, and Nox was a lot of things, but he was never helpless. I bit my lip, keeping my own questions to myself. Right now, we had to stay alive long enough to defeat Dorothy and get the hell out of Ev. Let's go, Lang said. Without waiting to see what we'd do, she stalked out of the room. We didn't have much choice but to follow.